History remembers certain names not because of their virtues, but because of the whispers that clung to them like shadows. Few names in the Renaissance echo with as much scandal, mystery, and fascination as that of Lucrezia Borgia, daughter of Pope Alexander VI. She was born into a world of power struggles, courtly intrigues, and secret desires, and she became a pawn in games that stretched far beyond her control. Of all the tales that surround her, none has been as provocative or as shocking as the story of her infamous wedding night. It was said that the marriage was consummated not once, not twice, but 3 times and in front of witnesses, to seal her fate and secure the destiny of Italy itself. The year was 1493, and Italy was a land divided. It was not yet the nation we know today, but a patchwork of warring city-states, each fighting for survival and dominance. Florence was ruled by the Medici, Venice by its great merchants and admirals, Naples by its royal kingdom, and Rome by the papacy. But in Rome sat a man unlike any other pope before him, Rodrigo Borgia, a Spaniard who had spent his life climbing the ranks of the church, had achieved the throne of St. Peter just the year before, taking the name Alexander VI. Unlike many who came before him, he made no attempt to hide his appetites. He was ambitious, cunning, and ruthless, but also deeply indulgent. He was a man of passions, and he openly acknowledged the children he had fathered. To him, family was not a secret shame, it was a weapon. His children would not hide in the shadows of illegitimacy. They would be tools, pawns, soldiers, and queens in the vast chess game of Italian politics. Among these children, Lucrezia stood out. Born in 1480, she had grown up in the opulent palaces of Rome. She was described by chroniclers as blonde, graceful, and elegant, with fair skin and captivating charm. But in the eyes of her father, her greatest value was not her beauty or her kindness. It was her ability to be married off, to secure alliances that would shift the balance of power. In Renaissance Italy, daughters of great families were coins of power, traded to secure peace or war, wealth or influence. So when the moment came, Lucrezia was promised to Giovanni Sforza, a man nearly twice her age, from the mighty Sforza family of Milan. The Sforzas were warriors, rulers, and one of the most powerful clans in the Italian world. This marriage was not about love nor even companionship. It was about politics, a pact sealed with flesh and vows. By uniting his daughter with Giovanni Sforza, Pope Alexander hoped to secure the military backing of Milan, creating a shield against enemies who circled Rome like wolves. The marriage was celebrated with the grandeur befitting the Pope's daughter. Rome itself seemed to shine for the occasion. The palaces were decorated, the feasts were extravagant, and nobles from across Italy gathered to witness the union. Chroniclers described music, laughter, rivers of wine, and endless banquets. Yet behind the glittering spectacle, whispers were already beginning to stir. For in the Renaissance courts, scandal was as valuable as gold, and the Borgias had no shortage of enemies. It was said that on the wedding night, something unusual happened. According to chroniclers and gossips alike, the consummation of the marriage was not done in private, but under the watchful eyes of witnesses. The reason? To prove Lucrezia's fertility, and to show that the union was legitimate and complete. The first consummation, it was whispered, was followed by another, and then yet another, all within the span of a single night. 3 times, it was said, the act was repeated as though the future of Italy demanded proof beyond doubt. For us today, the idea is shocking, but in the Renaissance world, marriages among nobles were rarely private affairs. They were contracts, ceremonies, and performances. Producing heirs was not just a family matter, it was a political necessity. And when that necessity was doubted, it was not unusual for witnesses to be present to testify that the marriage had been completed. Yet even by those standards, the rumors about Lucrezia's wedding night were extraordinary. To claim that the act was repeated 3 times in front of others was more than just a detail. It was an insult, an accusation, a way to paint the Borgias as depraved. Still, the story spread, carried by ambassadors, rivals, and chroniclers. It became part of the legend that surrounded the Borgias, a family already accused of corruption, excess, and sins that bordered on the unholy. For Lucrezia, the tale would never fully leave her. Though she was still barely a teenager, her name was now tied to scandal, to lust, and to whispers that she had been made to perform for the sake of her father's ambitions. As months passed, her marriage to Giovanni Sforza was anything but harmonious. The alliance between the Borgias and the Sforzas, once useful, began to crack. Political winds shifted. Enemies turned into allies and allies into burdens. Pope Alexander, always cunning, began to reconsider whether the union with Milan truly served his needs. And poor Giovanni, once the proud husband of the Pope's daughter, found himself less a partner and more a liability. For Lucrezia, the situation was even more delicate. She was young, caught between loyalty to her family and her duty as a wife. She was watched, judged, and whispered about constantly. Her beauty became a weapon wielded by others. Her innocence, if she ever had the chance to enjoy it, was overshadowed by political games. She was no longer just a bride. She was a symbol, a tool, and a figure of controversy. The consummation scandal, whether true or not, grew into legend. It painted the Borgias as grotesque players of power, as a family who used even their daughter's body to prove dominance. Yet to understand Lucrezia's story is to see beyond the gossip. She was not the villain of these tales. She was a girl placed in impossible circumstances, trapped in a web spun by her father and brothers, and judged by a world eager to see the Borgias as monsters. That infamous night would be only the beginning. For Lucrezia's life was filled with betrayals, annulments, new marriages, and accusations that would follow her to the grave. And as we peel back the layers of history, we see not only a young woman at the center of a scandal, but the reflection of a time when politics and morality danced together in shadows, and when every marriage could determine the fate of a nation. The wedding night of Lucrezia Borgia had already passed into rumor, scandal, and legend. Whispers of the three consummations carried by ambassadors and courtiers painted the Borgias as both grotesque and powerful. But that single night was only the opening act of a much larger drama, one that would follow Lucrezia for the rest of her life. Months after the marriage, it became clear that Giovanni Sforza was no longer the right ally for Pope Alexander VI. The political winds of Italy shifted as quickly as the tides of the sea. France was preparing to invade. Powerful neighbors threatened Rome, and the Sforzas of Milan were suddenly less valuable than before. The Pope, ever pragmatic, decided to sever the alliance. But in the world of noble families, divorce was not an option. Marriage was a sacred contract, and to break it required a scandal of its own. And so the Borgias turned their weapons not against France or Milan, but against Giovanni Sforza himself. Alexander VI demanded an annulment, claiming that the marriage had never been properly consummated. It was a cruel irony. The very same marriage that had been gossiped about for being consummated 3 times in one night was now declared unconsummated by the Pope. For Giovanni, it was a humiliation beyond endurance. To be accused of impotence, of failing to fulfill his duty as a husband, was not just a personal insult. It was a political death sentence. Giovanni fought back, refusing to accept the humiliation. He accused the Borgias of lies and treachery, and in his fury he went further. He accused Pope Alexander and his son, Cesare Borgia, of incest with Lucrezia herself. These were dangerous words, and they spread like wildfire across Italy. To Giovanni's enemies, they confirmed what they already believed about the Borgias, that they were a family without morality, without boundaries, who would even share a daughter's bed to satisfy their lust and power. For Lucrezia, the accusation was devastating. She was only a teenager, caught in the middle of political storms she did not create. But to the world outside, she became a symbol of depravity, the golden-haired temptress of the Vatican, the daughter whose innocence was stolen by her own family. Whether true or not, the rumor of incest would cling to her name forever. The annulment went forward. Giovanni was cast aside, humiliated and powerless. Lucrezia was returned to her family, her reputation battered, her future uncertain. Yet in the hands of her father and brothers, she was far from finished. She would be married again and again, each time to serve the interests of the Borgias, each time at the center of fresh rumors and scandals. In 1498, Lucrezia was married to Alfonso of Aragon, a handsome young prince from Naples. This time there was real affection between them. Unlike Giovanni, Alfonso seemed to care for her and she for him. But once more, politics poisoned everything. When alliances shifted, the Borgias turned on Alfonso. He was attacked in the streets of Rome, stabbed by assassins, and though he survived at first, he was later strangled to death. Many believed at the order of Lucrezia's brother Cesare. Once again, Lucrezia's name was tied to death and scandal, even if she had no part in it. Her third marriage, to Alfonso d'Este, Duke of Ferrara, was different. By then, Lucrezia was older, wiser, and more hardened by betrayal. She became a respected duchess, a patron of the arts, and even admired for her grace and political skill. But the whispers never left her. Wherever she went, people remembered the tales, the 3 consummations on her wedding night, the annulment for impotence, the accusations of incest, and the bloody death of her second husband. She was never just a duchess, she was a Borgia, and the Borgia name was forever stained with scandal. Yet history forces us to ask, how much of this was true, and how much was the invention of enemies? The Borgias had countless rivals. Every act of cruelty, every indulgence, every sin was magnified by those who hated them. To many, the Borgias represented everything corrupt about the church, everything rotten in Renaissance politics. Painting Lucretia as a seductress, a poisoner, or an immoral figure was an easy way to tarnish the entire family. And so stories grew like wildfire. Some may have had kernels of truth, but others were exaggerations or outright lies. Still, the image of Lucrezia Borgia as the woman whose wedding night was witnessed by others, whose body was a tool of politics and whose name was forever tied to scandal, remains one of history's most enduring myths. In reality, she may have been less a villain than a victim, a young woman used again and again by powerful men, her father, her brothers, her husbands, while her reputation was shaped by enemies she could never silence. By the time she died in 1519 at the age of 39, Lucrezia had transformed into something few expected, a respected duchess, a mother, and a patron of learning. In Ferrara, she was admired for her dignity and devotion, even as the rest of Italy continued to whisper about the scandals of her youth. She left behind children, alliances, and a legacy that was far more complex than the rumors suggest. But history does not always remember complexity. It remembers the stories that shock, the whispers that linger. And so more than 500 years later, we still remember Lucrezia Borgia not as the quiet Duchess of Ferrara, but as the scandalous bride of Rome, the woman said to have been consummated 3 times in one night before witnesses, the daughter of a pope whose fate was sealed not by her own choices, but by the ambitions of her family. Her story is a mirror into the Renaissance world, a time of great art and beauty, but also of corruption and cruelty. A time when marriages were contracts, when women were pawns, and when a single night could decide the future of nations. Whether the tale of the 3 consummations was truth, exaggeration, or pure invention, it became a symbol of what the Borgias represented: power without shame, and politics played with the lives of their own blood. And perhaps that is why we still tell this story. Because beneath the layers of gossip, beneath the rumors and scandals, lies a young woman who lived and died in the heart of one of history's most dangerous families. She was both victim and survivor, sinner and saint, legend and reality. And as long as we remember her, Lucrezia Borgia will remain one of the most controversial women in history.